Foundry, Volume 1, Number 1. Why, but that carries me back a long way. Many of you folks have seen me grow old in the foundry business and know how I love it. There's something about the rattle of the crane, the whir of the blower, the smell of the burnt cores, burnt sand. And there are many interesting stories back of this foundry industry to which but little attention has been paid. For instance, the story of foundry sand. Foundry sand is supposed to have its origin in the action of the glacier, together with the action of wind, water, and weathering. And the foundry sand, as we know it, had its origin in these beginnings.
Thousands of years ago, a great sheet of ice came down out of the north. It left a blanket of these materials in the region. In the course of the centuries, this and other sand was scoured and mixed and moved. Streams and rivers came down out of the hills, eroding material from the older geological formations. And out of the banks, they cut gravel and sand and silt. Running water will carry material until its speed is checked, as for instance, where a stream enters a lake. When this happens, a delta is formed. As the speed of the water decreases, the coarsest material, being heaviest, is dropped first. The finer is carried farther out. In a cross-section of a delta, the sand lies in layers. The reason that coarse sand is sometimes found above fine sand is that the water changes speed. When the water runs slowly, fine sand is deposited, but when it runs faster, a layer of coarser material is laid down. There are other ways in which water plays a part in distributing material. One of these is where a river passes through a fairly flat plain, and the normal carrying of material downstream is interrupted by a flood. When the water rises over the banks, it flows more slowly. The coarser grains will settle first. As it becomes still quieter, finer and finer grains will settle out. And finally, when the flood recedes, a layer of the finest material is left on top. The wind, too, has played a great part in forming deposits of sand. One action is in scouring and polishing the grains themselves. Further, it works on older deposits, gradually moving them and sorting the grain sizes as they are blown. Waves also grind and polish the grains. The currents transport them according to fineness and deposit them along the shores. And so, our sand was made for us. When our country was young, bonded sand for our foundries was brought over as ballast from Europe. Other sand was shoveled from nearby dunes on our shores. And then, in 1841, 100 years ago, bonded molding sands were dug at South Amboy by Samuel Whitehead. There at South Amboy in New Jersey, the old workings, the old docks stand today. The men have moved on to new banks, but here stand the beginnings of one industry which helped to build our country from a land of farms to a land of factories. Today, sand is loaded over other docks, many docks. Bonded sand, unbonded sand, both are found in many parts of the East, but the unbonded are more widely distributed. About 20,000 years ago, the northern area around McConnellsville was a lake. Sand was deposited here. The grain size of various deposits ranges considerably, all the way from AFA fineness 55 to 225. It is used for cores, synthetic molding sand, and for furnace bottoms. The grades with fineness numbers above 100 develop a good deal of green strength and are frequently used in cores which are liable to sag and where smooth surfaces are required. These banks lie under a heavy overburden of soil. Occasionally, hard sand layers occur which are taken out by screens. And for many years there have been a lot of unbonded sands taken from the land of New England, particularly in Rhode Island and Cape Cod. Here at Providence, the sand is also under a deep overburden which is taken off by drag line. But under that covering lie banks of unusual core sand, 30 to 50 feet deep. The land around Providence was near the southern border of the great ice sheet. Here the meltwater issued from the glacier, charged with gravel and sand and clay, which were deposited here and sorted. The sand is fine, so fine that the cores don't require blacking. It's used in light castings where smooth surfaces and green strength are needed, as for instance in food choppers, impellers, and light hardware. The sand at Wareham, close by Providence, was also near the southern edge of the ice sheet. So the sand is of the same origin. But it differs from Providence core sand in many ways. It's a much coarser sand, about 65 and 78 AFA fineness numbers. It differs also in being deposited with gravel, which has to be screened out. This particular bank of sand is below water level, so the sand, being already wet, is carried to the top of a tower. The scalping is done by spraying streams of water on a vibrating screen. The gravel is thrown aside, and the sand washed down into a basin where it is held until shipment. And in great deposits on the shores of our country, sand lies in dunes, here on the Atlantic, or on the Great Lakes, as in Mexico Bay on Lake Ontario. For thousands of years, the outer end of Cape Cod has been growing towards the northwest. Currents sweeping along pick up the sands and put them down farther on, where the water goes slower. As the deposits build up above the level of high tide, they are attacked by the winds, which continue the work of cleaning and sorting, which was started by the water. This process through the centuries has resulted in a remarkably uniform grain size. And, as you would expect, the grains have been somewhat rounded by the water and wind. It is about AFA fineness 27. It is used in heavy and medium weight casting and for sandblasting. South Jersey is a part of the Atlantic coastal plain. For thousands of years, streams eroded material from the higher land in the north and west and brought them down to the coastal regions. Some of these materials were deposited on floodplains, some in the shallow waters of the ocean offshore. Here at Dividing Creek, there is a large deposit which extends as deep as 40 feet below water level. The sand is unusually pure, over 99% silica, an excellent sand for steel, either cores or poles. At this particular plant, it is pumped through a pipeline from the deposit. The process is one of removing successively finer grades. The coarsest sand is taken out in a vibrating screen. It then goes through a series of classifiers, a different grade being removed at each one. The fine float sand remaining is scooped out of the water on a revolving pan. These grades are piled, and the water drains off. It is shipped either damp or dried. The silica sand from this and other deposits ranges from AFA fineness number 125 up to coarse blast sand. But aside from sharp sand, South Jersey has great banks of bonded sands. Among them, Millville gravel, for many years a standby for foundrymen.
Now, this is a bank. The laboratory reports show 30 fineness and 19 clay. And that's just what the specifications call for.
All right, let's move number 3 shovel over here and strip some more.
All right.
The sand in these banks varies greatly in grain size. This makes it possible to ship many grades from each shipping point. But this takes supervision, and intelligent supervision, in order to provide a foundry with the right materials. In the processing of this sand, it is put through large revolving screens which take out roots and stones. The screens also serve for mixing and aeration. The sand is then loaded directly into cars. Molding sand and gravel of the Dorchester-Millville district are unusually good for medium and heavy castings. Some of the South Jersey sands are the only naturally bonded sands in the country being used for steel castings. They have unusually high green and dry strength. The grains have been slightly rounded by water action, but are sufficiently rough to hold the bond which has been distributed over the surface by nature. There are a good many deposits of bonded sand in the New Jersey coastal plain. South Amboy is another particularly important one. This sand has been used for 100 years in foundries making medium and heavy castings. It is used in green sand, dry sand, and loam work. Close by these banks are deposits of plastic fire clay. When it is pulverized, it can be mixed with the molding sand for special purposes.